So while I still love America, that quote, those merciless savages had a secret to maintaining a unified colony without falling into a monarchy. You shouldn't be able to say in the same breath that these founding fathers were using phrases like merciless Indian savage and at the same time literally basing their government on what they were learning from the Iroquois Confederacy. But that's reality. You know, reality doesn't fit in a neat box. Our founding fathers were indeed historical giants and some geniuses in revolutionizing the relationship between the individual and the state, but they didn't do it alone. Hi, I'm Danielle Romero, and thank you so much for being with me today on my channel, where I have been talking about what does it mean to be an American. Last year, around the 4th of July, I stumbled upon this shirt that was emblazoned with really jarring phrase, and it said, quote, merciless Indian savages, and attributed the quote to the Declaration of Independence. And they released it, I think, around the 4th of July, and it was a stark contrast to, you know, the patriotic fervor of 4th of July shirts and stuff like that you usually see in the United States at the end of June, beginning of July. And as I was contemplating this quote and kind of researching it because it was unfamiliar to me, a troubling narrative began to take shape in my mind. It was this idea that maybe in order to champion like freedom and justice here in modern America, one has to foster animosity to the nation herself. But here's where the nuance that I always talk about comes into play, where maybe a perspective emerges that allows us to love America while still relentlessly pursuing progress. The America we live in today is a very different America than the founding fathers had established, or maybe even different than they had imagined. But it's still a testament to their visionary mind. We can't pretend that they didn't exist in an exclusionary society, making compromises, in our opinion, that accommodated injustices. But recognizing these truths doesn't diminish their remarkable achievements. And sometimes we zoom in on the offensive language that was used in the past, and we let it overshadow everything. Now, I want to actually talk about this phrase, merciless Indian savages. So it's from the Declaration of Independence. It's grievance 27 against King George. And so when they say he in this paragraph, they're referring to the things King George has done against the colonists. So it says, he has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, unquote. So this is the Declaration of Independence, right? The same document that's, you know, all men are created equal. But here's what's fascinating to me about the history of this. While the founders were using disparaging language to the Native American people in this document, they had at the same time also been learning from these people and incorporating elements of Haudenosaunee or Iroquois history. Now, the Iroquois Confederacy influenced the way that they created the American government. During the debate over the Declaration of Independence, 21 Iroquois chiefs were actually invited to Independence Hall. And they were invited to Independence Hall because the Iroquois nation's governance system was an inspiration for many of the founding fathers. They had had experience governing over a vast geographic expanse, and they had a very federalist approach to government. So this is a unique challenge that, you know, even the brilliant mind of John Locke really hadn't talked about. It wasn't something that had been fleshed out. Well, how do we govern all of these disparate colonies and create them into something one, a confederacy of, you know, for lack of a better word, have a united purpose? Now, John Adams actually suggested to those who were drafting the Constitution that they should study the government of the modern Indians. He cited the Mohawks, who he argued enjoyed, quote, complete individual independence, while tribal leaders brought major decisions like declarations of war to a, quote, national assembly. So it was this idea that the colonists were trying to leave behind this monarchical system, right? Where, you know, the king is this divine ruler over everyone. author and professor Donald Grind Jr. From the University of Buffalo, he wrote a book where he talked about the influence of the Iroquois Confederacy on our Constitution. And he wrote, quote, "The intellectual transference of American Indian governmental theories to the American people was so clearly present in the colonial times." It's like you can see this direct parallel of influence from the Iroquois Confederacy. Ben Franklin said, quote, "It would be a very strange thing if 6 nations of ignorant savages should be capable of forming a scheme for such a union and be able to execute it in such a manner as that it has subsisted ages." Basically, Ben's saying, like, I don't know how they did it, but they did it. He was a man of his time, right? He's still using like the term ignorant savages, but I think that kind of hints at the nuance of this. How ignorant do you think somebody really is if you're looking at their governmental system and saying, hey, that's actually what we need right now? The Iroquois Confederacy was not an exact model for the US Constitution. It's not like they took it verbatim. However, it did provide something that Locke and Montesquieu couldn't, which was a real-life example of some political concepts that the framers were interested in adopting. One writer goes on to say that the Iroquois Confederacy dates back several centuries to when the great peacemaker founded it by uniting the 5 nations, the Mohawk, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, the Oneida, and the Seneca. And around 1722, the Tuscarora Nation joined the Iroquois, which they call themselves the Haudenosaunee, or the people of the Longhouse. And together, these 6 nations formed a multi-state government while maintaining their own individual governance. What does that sound like? This model of, we have states' rights. We like to talk about states' rights. A lot of that is mirrored in the way that the Haudenosaunee brought these disparate nations together under the umbrella of the Iroquois Confederacy. Now, the colonial bias and violence against Native Americans at the time may have helped obscure the framers' interest in the Native American governmental structure. That is to say that you have a very fractious colony. You're trying to bring people together, and what brings people together more than common enemy, right? However, public awareness of the connection between the Iroquois Constitution and the United States Constitution increased around the bicentennial of the Constitution in 1987, which was the 200th anniversary. Congress passed a 1988 resolution that formally acknowledged the influence of the Iroquois Confederacy on the United States Constitution. The part of the resolution said that the confederation of the original 13 colonies into one republic was influenced by the political system developed by the Iroquois Confederacy, as were many of the democratic principles which were incorporated into the Constitution itself. And I think it serves as a reminder that history is complex and often, and maybe always, defies our simplistic narratives. You shouldn't be able to say in the same breath that these founding fathers were using phrases like merciless, Indian, savage, and at the same time, literally basing their government on what they were learning from the Iroquois Confederacy. But that's reality. Reality doesn't fit in a neat box. Our democracy is a work in progress. Let's not fall into the trap of idealizing it and putting these people on pedestals and being angry when one of our beloved historical characters is taken down a notch. But at the same time, we don't want to dismiss all of this beautiful history because it is flawed. Anything a human touches is going to be flawed. Everything. Our founding fathers were indeed historical giants and some geniuses in revolutionizing the relationship between the individual and the state, but they didn't do it alone. So why do I still love America? It's because I see the potential for growth and the capacity to learn from our history. We should confront our past like I do on this channel. America's greatness lies not only in her achievements, but in her ability, our ability, to reflect and adapt and strive to be better every generation. Let's celebrate the accomplishments of our founding fathers while recognizing their flaws. and work together to build a more perfect union. Happy 4th of July.